In 1914, just before the start of World War I, Germany had a daring and ludicrous plan. They converted a cruise liner to make it look like a battleship to scare their enemies. It worked, until the real ship turned up. It happened like this. In 1913, a beautiful cruise liner was launched in Hamburg, Germany, the SS Cap Trafalgar. It was built for service between Germany and an area in South America known as the River Plate, an estuary beside Buenos Aires and on the border of Argentina and Uruguay. The ship was named after Cape Trafalgar, nameplace of the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, where Nelson and the British Navy defeated Napoleon's French Navy and the Spanish Navy's combined effort to take control of the English Channel. The ship had 3 funnels, or chimneys, and was 187 metres long and 22 metres wide. It could carry nearly 1,600 passengers and was powered by steam. Trafalgar made her maiden voyage in April 1904 from Hamburg to different ports in South America, including Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. At the time, she was the largest vessel travelling the South American route and one of the most luxurious and beautiful. To give you an idea, her upper decks included a swimming pool and a greenhouse which held a cafe inside. In first class, the walls and stairwells and many of the furnishings were adorned with gold. The staterooms were decorated in the highest fashion for the time and the epitome of German elegance. If you've ever watched the movie Titanic, you'll get the idea. Unfortunately for the Trafalgar and the Germans' elite, her time as an elegant cruiser of the sea was short-lived, as later in that same year, August 1914, war was declared in Europe. Germany now needed battleships, not cruise liners. A trade war had begun between the German Empire and Central Powers against the Allies. The British Royal Navy surprised the Germans by blockading German ports as soon as the war started, leaving many of the German fleet trapped and those at sea finding it difficult to rearm. After the war broke out, the Trafalgar was docked in Buenos Aires. The German Navy decided to convert the ship and others into an auxiliary cruiser. In other words, a normal ship fitted with guns and artillery. On the 18th of August, she arrived in Montevideo for coal and then set sail for the remote Brazilian island of Trinidad. Here she met with the gunboat SMS Eber, which transferred naval officers, ammunition and guns to the liner. Her third chimney, which was a dummy, was removed and she was armed with 2 naval guns and an autocannon. Her mission was to sink British merchant ships to help the German Empire win the trade war and a larger, ongoing world war. But the plan wasn't just to make the ship a useful auxiliary attacker. She was also disguised. They renamed the ship the RMS Carmania and painted the lettering on the side. RMS stands for Royal Mail Ship. They had apparently copied the name and likeness from 2 British ships known as the Pretty Sisters. The Trafalgar then would be known as the Ugly Sister. The Trafalgar now looked like a British postal service ship, meaning it wouldn't be recognised as German until it was already too close and could cause havoc and destroy many merchant ships before ever being discovered. Well, that was the plan anyway. Her first trip out was pretty unsuccessful. She didn't meet any ships and nothing really interesting happened, so she returned to the little island, refueled with coal and set off again. Only this time she did meet a ship, a British one. You see, the British had a similar idea to the Germans. They also retrofitted ships to be used in the military, and one of these ships was an ocean liner called the RMS Carmania. Yes, the real RMS Carmania. not the fake Trafalgar, the real one, fitted with much bigger guns and armed for battle. The real Carmania was in Trinidad, trying to find small German warships. You can imagine the surprise the Germans and the British both had when they saw each other. The British must have thought initially it was an ally, but the Germans must have been cursing their luck. Not only had they been found by the British, but also found by the very ship they had copied a name from. One of the pretty sisters was here, and the ugly sister was in trouble. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I do all the production, research, editing and mixing, everything myself, and I really appreciate every listener that I get. You can support the podcast by joining my Patreon for just $5 a month, where you get access to some bonus content. I'm also on social media and YouTube. I'm glad you are enjoying It Happened Like This, and I'm very thankful for your support. Now back to the episode. Both captains realised that they needed room to fight each other, so they headed out towards the sea. The Trafalgar sent out encoded messages to anyone in the area that they're about to engage in battle with the real Carmania. Their ships turned on each other, but the Carmania fired too early, and the Trafalgar actually landed the first blow. Over the next 2 hours, however, the battle swung in favour of the British, and the Trafalgar was hit 79 times, had holes below the waterline, and had her bridge totally destroyed. As the ships drew in closer, the Trafalgar began to also inflict some damage on its counterpart, and fires broke out on both ships. Sailors lined the rails of both ships and fired with machine guns, coming to within a few hundred yards of each other. Because neither ship had modern automated loading mechanisms, it was all done by hand, similar to the days of old with cannons and pirates. The Carmania looked like it was ready to burn out of control, but just then the Trafalgar veered away and started lowering lifeboats. She had started to keel over on her port side, and very soon after started to sink rapidly. The captain and 51 sailors were killed, but 279 were saved by local coal ships from Trinidad. The Carmania looked like it would sink too. It was heavily flooded and burning, and 9 British soldiers had been killed in the fighting. It was at this point, however, that things got even worse for the Brits. A German ship, known as the SS Kronprinz Wilhelm, had heard the SOS calls from the Trafalgar and arrived at the scene of the battle. The problem was, of course, that they didn't know which was the real RMS Carmania. The captain of the Kronprinz thought it might be some kind of trap. He knew the SOS had gone out and wondered if other British ships would be on the way. Unsure which ship was which, he just turned around and left without firing a shot. The Carmania, barely afloat, managed to turn away and head south, hoping to meet another British ship that would save her. And a day later, she was found and rescued by the British Navy. She was taken into dock and repaired and would go on to sail for another 18 years. The fake Carmania, the Trafalgar, sank to the bottom of the South Atlantic Ocean. Even though the plan didn't really work out, it was still a brilliant one, and the Germans tried something similar with another boat called the SMS Sea Adler. The Sea Adler was a sailing ship and one of the last to be used in war. Because it used sails, it didn't need to refuel for coal and didn't appear to pose much threat on first glance. She managed to escape the blockade by the Royal Navy by flying a Norwegian flag and sailing out to ocean. Over the course of a year, this ship managed to sink another 16 British, French, US and Italian ships. Its captain, Felix von Luckner, became well known after the war for his seamanship and conduct. According to his life, we could probably do a whole podcast on his adventures. He always gave ships a chance to surrender, and only one opposing sailor was killed during the Sea Adler's many journeys and captures. And that is the story of fake ships during World War One. It goes to show you that so much of war and battle is about appearances and deception. In a time when communications and navigation were much less advanced than today, captains and crews set out on daring missions into the vast Atlantic Ocean. What must the sailors have felt when the Trafalgar and Carmania saw each other? What must the captain of merchant ships have felt when an old sailboat turned out to be a warship and ordered surrender when it got within reach? These days we rely a lot more on technology like drones and submarines and radar to destroy enemy ships, and there's a certain distance in some ways compared to sailors standing out on board a couple of 100 meters away and shooting at each other. Modern war technology, of course, raises its own questions about ethics, choices, and who's responsible for what. But once upon a time, painting a ship, stacking some guns and sailors on board, and setting sail was the best plan you could come up with. And if it wasn't for pure bad luck, it probably would have worked too.